That's what I'm trying to think. Clinton
If you had to choose the lesser of
really
evil.
think, well, I suppose Clinton would be the lesser evil, but really, I mean, they really think that they're not answerable to anybody.
What about Rand Paul? What do you think of him?
He's a moron. Why do you think I think he's a moron?
Because he's just an isolationist when we're a country of globalization.
Well, in order to, let me try to answer it this way. In order to have a great leader, you have to have somebody who's an expert at leadership, who's really a superior at political leadership, which is not the same thing as being a great brain surgeon. It's a completely different talent. And I've tried to explain for Aristotle what those talents entail. So if you need someone that's superior, that means that you're going to rule over ordinary, average people who have a very hard time making decisions in their own life, much less in the public sphere, right? So those who take political leadership seriously are not optimists about human nature. That doesn't mean they're cynics, just that they think people are average, by and large
They're
average.
pessimistic.
Which is not idealistic and not similar. But you see, Rand Paul is an idealist about human nature. How do I know that?
Because he's a complete libertarian, isolationist.
But not so that, but he doesn't believe in government of any kind. He doesn't believe in government of crappy leaders, but he also doesn't believe in governments of George Washington's, Abraham Lincoln's, and Franklin Roosevelt's. You see? So that must mean he has great confidence in human beings, and he's just wrong about that. All I'm saying is that 1% of us are great plumbers. If you ever paid a plumber to come to your house, you know how they can screw up things, right? Great roofers, great doctors, great surgeons. Great ball players. I mean, 99% of all human beings are just average at what they do. Great leaders. But we have to try to identify who these people are, and then give them the room within certain democratic restraints to rule us. And then 4 years later, ask us whether we think they did a good job, let them continue to rule. But that's complete anathema to Rand Paul. He thinks that people all can make very good decisions for themselves, privately and publicly. And that's just crazy. That's just not the way people are. So I think he's... And of course, as we pointed out last time, he's not a true libertarian, because both him and his father, his father is an obstetrician, are against abortion, letting women have the freedom.
Right.
That's just one example. So it leads to all these contradictions. When this ideology, a great leader can't be an ideologue. The ideologue has one great idea, and he doesn't care about the circumstances and the obstacles. I'm going to do this no matter what. A great leader can't be an ideologue. He can't just have one idea. And that's what all libertarians do. Whether you're a socialist, or a communist, or a capitalist, or a feminist, they have one idea. It's all the fault of men. It's all the fault of capitalists. Understand? It's all the fault of blacks. It's all. That's just not the way human beings are. So, great leadership is the opposite of ideology. A libertarian, by definition, is an ideologist. An ideologue is the proper word. You can't fit any of these great leaders into a pigeonhole.
So I have a...
Lincoln was the founder of the Republican Party. How do you like that? There would never have been a Rand Paul without Abraham Lincoln. Obviously, they have nothing in common whatsoever. All these catch terms that describe people don't apply to great leaders. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I have a question. So we're going in. We'll be going into our whoever's elected will be going into our third presidency in the Middle East. And how does the person convince people that we can sort of take a lesser role, but we'll still be safe if we take a lesser role?
We have to, that's also an excellent question. We have to say, let's learn from Vietnam. That's 50 years ago, that's only just yesterday. Let's learn from George H.W. Bush, let's learn from George W. Bush, let's learn from Obama. Let's try to figure out the lessons that we should learn from those wars. And the lesson that I've learned is America cannot support people who will not or cannot fight for themselves. We can't control Iraq, neither could Alexander the Great. Only Iraqis can control Iraq and make it a better place. We can help them. Now, how do you help them? How do you help after? What you do is you ask for volunteers among the SEALs and the Special Forces. They have to volunteer. You send them in there, and you train forces who want to fight for their country and make it a better place. Free and honorable places to live. But we cannot fight. We cannot take on the fight for ourselves among people who will not and cannot fight for themselves. It was proved by Vietnam, it was proved by Iraq, it was proved by Afghanistan.
What about the threat of Islamic radicals here in America?
What threat do they pose to the United States? They pose a threat to decent people in the Middle East. You understand? They're murdering, they're torturing decent people in the Middle East. What threat do you think that they pose to the United States?
Just the other day, or a few weeks ago in Texas, I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's a common argument that people have, like suicide bombers, stuff like that.
What happened in Texas?
At the political cartoon art show.
They were killed in 2 minutes.
You're
They're
absolutely right.
They're not really a threat. I mean, there's some threat, but not a major threat that would cause us to spend
ISIS
$1
is
billion.
saying
So they're not an immediate threat to the United States.
We can talk about Texas also, the KKK shootout where people got killed and all that.
And the gang,
and
the gangs.
So like.
By the way, did you see the tattoos on those bikers?
No.
They were all over the papers. You know, they were Nazi tattoos.
I'm not
SS.
surprised.
Yeah.
Extremist groups from all backgrounds are a threat. It's not just the Islamist one. And the problem is that there's a bias that people have.
Yeah,
That's just function on the Muslim ones.
Obviously, Al Qaeda was a threat to the United States. They took out the Twin Towers. But I don't see ISIS as being a major threat to the United States at all. They're a major threat to decent people in the Middle East.
I agree.
So when decent people in the Middle East decide to rise up in unity to fight them, you can count on our help. We'll give you weapons, we'll give you training, but we can't fight for you. That's what we learned in Vietnam. That's what we learned in Iraq, that's what we learned in Afghanistan. If you want our help, we'll do it. That comes under the heading, love thy neighbor as thyself. You talk about an ideal. Love thy neighbor as thyself.
Doesn't our involvement there exacerbate the problem that you're talking about? How obsessed we are about, ISIS coming over here and causing problems, or even the Twin Towers, like Iyad mentioned. I mean, if we had less undesired involvement,
the Twin
wouldn't
Towers were pretty
we be less of a
They were pretty
target?
serious because that took a lot of planning. But Al Qaeda is not the same thing. Did you read the recent headlines? When they took out Osama bin Laden, they got all his papers. Did you see that headline?
Yeah, I saw it.
And one of the papers said what?
It was something about killing more Americans.
Or attacks.
It said we should not try to establish a new caliphate.
Islamic State.
Yeah, that's right.
What were the headlines showing that Bin Laden was planning to do more attacks in America? What was the news, the media saying that? Because that's what I was watching it today. That's what the media, like CNN even, wanted to have planned more attacks against America. Is what the papers say. But unfortunately, that's what it is. It's the media twisting.
Well, they really do, there's no question about it. I don't see how ISIS threatens this country. They're horrible people, but I don't see them. Except in isolated cases, and we can deal with those. But they certainly are hurting decent people in the Middle East, I mean. And surely they should be able to count on us to help them help themselves.
When they're ready for it.
It can't be they want to fight them. They have to be able to effectively fight them before we risk our lives.
They might end up actually being their own worst enemy, though. It was saying that, like, you know, they take over a town and like, they don't know how to do things like run water and trash pickup, and so all these like towns outside of
ISIS.
they
don't want to say they're just
I think it's going to come back and bite them. Like, you know, that could be like an effective catalyst.
What Islamic sect do they represent?
Very, 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 very extreme.
I think it's
Like, even Al Qaeda considers them extreme.
Well, I know that, but are they Shia?
Sunni.
Are
They're
they
Sunni,
Shia?
Sunni.
Yeah, so what is Iran?
Shia.
Well, so now
Hezbollah, Shia.
we have to rely on Iran, of all things. Iran is sending troops into Ramallah to defeat ISIS. Can you imagine how crazy that is? That we're relying on Iran to do our bidding, which shouldn't be our bidding in the first place. So there you are. What about another? You always have good questions. What? Are you being quiet again?
Yeah.
The one thing good I can say about Rand Paul is he says, see, we have too many people in prison, and we need to do something different than what we're doing now.
Well, you may
Maybe
be
his
right.
father both took that.
But-
They both said that. And, I mean, they have like two issues that they're good on.
Yeah.
And the rest of it's like, well, we don't want a Department of Education. It's like,
Now let me ask you. I was hoping you'd say that's a great question. Let me ask you this: where did the demand from whom did the demand come originally? For 3 strikes you're out, and putting people in prison for if they commit 3 minor crimes. Where do you think that demand came from?
From the prison system.
No. Well, no, let me try to help you. So I live out in the suburbs, where there are crimes that are being committed, but not the crimes that are putting these people in jail. Drugs aren't being sold on the street, for example, right? So it couldn't have come from me. Sadly enough, these people are going to want to kill themselves with drugs. It's not affecting me. And it couldn't have come from other suburbanites. It also couldn't have come from many white people that lived in the city, because this was mostly black on black crimes. So if you go back in our history and you actually read the headlines, 30 or 40 years ago, it was the demand from decent people living in the ghettos to put these people in jail as quickly as possible. 99% of these people are decent, hard-working people trying to make it under very difficult circumstances. All you need is one person out of 1,000 to ruin 999 people's lives. One person in my neighborhood who insists on having a huge dog and not taking care of it, and barking all night, and keeping us, we have to go to work at 8 in the morning, you understand? They're on welfare. One person. But another thing is, where did the demand come to have harsher penalties for crack than heroin? Now we know crack is the drug of choice for poor people. Heroin, though, huh?
Cocaine. It's cocaine.
Yeah,
It's the
and
difference.
cocaine. Where do you suppose that demand came from?
rape.
It came from the same decent African Americans, because the epidemic was because it was so relatively, it was taking over these black communities. So before we talk about this, I want you to understand, so this doesn't become the flavor of the month. The original demand to put what we consider now to be relatively minor criminals in jail for a long time came from black communities in the inner cities, because these few people were making the lives of decent people in those communities miserable. The cheap drugs, crack, understand, and the offenders, the 3 strikes you're out offenders. It didn't come from middle class people who are now being charged with, it may be right, it may be wrong. Changing the prison system may be the right thing to do. But the system changed in reaction to the people who were hurting the most by these folks, and it was the inner city black communities. Rightly demanding that these folks be taken out of their communities so they can try to live a decent life. So when they send their kids to go to school in the morning, you understand? They could hope to have them come back instead of being shot by rival drug gangs selling crack for $5 a pop. So what should be done with these minor drug offenders? If they shouldn't be in jail, where should they be? Well, trillions of dollars. Troops have to be spent, and they have to be maybe not in a jail, but they have to be kept in places that will help them get off drugs. Not only help them get off addiction, but also train them for jobs so that they don't go back into the same communities. And so reforming the criminal system, the criminal justice system, is a lot more complicated than you think. Just sending people back on the street is just going to make a horrible situation worse for decent people in black communities. You have to hold them, you have to arrest them and hold them, but not just hold them. Try to find a way to put them in the direction of a decent life, which means